Here's what's coming up on the world today. At least 6 people killed in armed clashes in Lebanese capital, Beirut. Officials say Norway bow and arrow attack appears to be an act of terror. Fire at Taiwan tower block kills at least 46 people. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Teniola Shobowale. We begin in Lebanon, where at least 6 people have been shot dead in the capital Beirut during a protest against the judge investigating last year's devastating port explosion. More people were injured in the incident near the Palace of Justice as supporters of the Hezbollah and Amal movements demand the replacement of Judge Takar Bitar.
These are the moments of the shooting in Beirut today. Security forces evacuating civilians from several buildings close to the gunfire. In scenes reminiscent of the war, local television stations broadcast footage of bullets bouncing off buildings and people running for cover. The shooting began from the Christian neighborhood of Ain el Ramane before spiraling into an exchange of fire. Bursts of gunfire were heard for hours, along with several explosions that appear to be rocket-propelled grenades fired into the air. Army units were seen patrolling TAIWAN area in the capital, and a fire truck arrived at the location where fire occurred, caused by heavy gunshots. Supporters of the Lebanese Shiite group Hezbollah were targeted as they headed to the protest demanding the removal of Judge Tariq Bitar, who has been investigating last year's explosion at the city's port. The Lebanese army said the gunfire had targeted protesters as they passed through a traffic circle located in an area dividing Christian and Shiite Muslim neighborhoods. Shiite parties Hezbollah and Amal say armed groups had fired at protesters from rooftops in Beirut, aiming at their heads in an attack they said aimed to drag the country into strife. Probe into the catastrophic Beirut port explosion was frozen on Tuesday for a second time after 2 politicians wanted for questioning filed a new complaint against the lead investigator. Judge Tariq Bitar had issued an arrest warrant for one of the politicians who filed it, former Finance Minister Ali Hassan Khalil, a senior politician close to Hezbollah, shortly before he was informed of the complaint. The second politician was ex-Public Works Minister Ghazi Zeta, also Hezbollah ally, who was due for questioning on Wednesday. The blast in August 2020 was one of the biggest non-nuclear explosions on record. It killed more than 200 people and devastated swathes of Beirut.
In Norway, the security service says a deadly bow and arrow attack, which left 5 people dead, appears to have been an act of terror. However, a motive has not yet been determined. The suspect, a 37-year-old Danish citizen named Aspen Andersen Braithen, had converted to Islam, and there were fears he had been radicalized. He's accused of killing 4 women and a man on Wednesday night in the southern town of Kongsberg. He's due to appear in court on Friday. Flags were flown at half-mast while flowers and other memorials have been placed in Kongsberg's main square. The attack was Norway's deadliest since a far-right extremist murdered 77 people in July 2011. Officials in Taiwan say at least 46 people have been killed and dozens more seriously injured in a fire that broke out in a 13-story tower block south of the island. According to the fire department, 79 people were taken to hospital, 14 of them said to be in serious condition.
The fire occurred at a residential and commercial building in the city of Kaohsiung early this morning. The building's lower section had housed restaurants, karaoke bars and a cinema, but these were reportedly no longer in use. A number of residents in the block of about 120 apartments are thought to be old or have disabilities. Firefighters battled the blaze for over 4 hours. They later reported that 79 people were taken to hospital, 14 in serious condition. Authorities warned that people may have been trapped in the residential part of the building between the 7th and 11th floors. Residents within the area said they heard a loud bang that sounded like an explosion before the fire. One said the loud bang may have come from the power lines, which are outside. Fire officials are warning the public not to allow rubbish accumulate in or around their residences and to keep the staircases unobstructed.
To the COVID-19 pandemic now, the World Health Organization says 6 out of every 7 coronavirus cases are not being detected in Africa. So far, only 8 million COVID-19 cases have been recorded, but the WHO now estimates that the real figure is 59 million. In the main, the only people who are tested are those who turn up at health centers with symptoms and those intending to travel out of the country. This means that a huge number of asymptomatic cases are not being spotted, resulting in more transmission. WHO's Africa Director, Dr. Matshidiso Moeti, says to deal with this, the WHO is boosting community screening in 8 countries, aiming to reach 7 million people with rapid testing in the next year.
There have now been more than 8.4 million COVID-19 cases in Africa, and sadly, 214,000 lives have been lost. In the past week, there were 42,000 new cases, a decrease of 35% compared to the previous week. In most countries, cases are trending downwards or plateauing, but a few are still reporting increases, including Angola, Gabon, and Cameroon. With 67 million Africans now fully vaccinated, equal to only 4.9% of the continent's population, hundreds of millions of people remain vulnerable to severe COVID-19 illness and death. 31 countries have only 2.4% of their populations fully vaccinated. Excuse me. So we're by no means near the finishing line for this pandemic. For the end to be in sight, vaccination rates must dramatically increase, case management capacities should be expanded, and basic public health measures, including active case finding and testing, should be reinforced. Throughout the pandemic, concerns of underdetection and underestimation of the burden of COVID-19 have been raised across all parts of the world. In Africa, with our low vaccination rates, it's vitally important to have a better grasp of where and how the virus is circulating in our communities. As WHO in Africa, we're using a model to estimate the degree of underestimation. Our analysis indicates that as few as 1 in 7 cases is being detected, meaning that the true COVID-19 burden in Africa could be around 59 million cases. The proportion of underreporting on deaths is lower. Our estimates suggest around 1 in 3 deaths are being reported.
Professor Oyewale Tomori is the chairman, Expert Review Committee on COVID-19, and also a member of the World Health Organization's Technical Advisory Group on COVID-19 vaccine composition. Professor, thank you so much for your time on the program.
Thank you. My pleasure.
I'm sure this is not news to you. We've discussed the issue of infection rates and the low numbers recorded in Africa, which can be attributed to testing. But is this review a reality check for the World Health Organization about the situation in Africa?
Yeah, I think it's good that WHO is coming out to take action on what we already know. Studies before, not only in Nigeria and other parts of Africa, have been showing that the serological seroprevalence studies done actually tell us more of the people infected than the reports we are getting. But that's the way it should be, because what we're reporting are only those who are coming sick and reporting to the hospital. There are a lot of people who are asymptomatic and who are not showing up in the hospital, so we don't know that they are positive. And because of that, I mean, they are considerably more problem for us, because since they are not showing any symptoms, they are busy, they are spreading the disease and causing more infection. Previous studies done with the different waves have shown that there have been a doubling of the number of people showing seropositivity, after each wave. I think Nigeria had about 20% the first time. The second wave, we had about 40. We're not getting about 60% of people with positivity rate, which means a lot of people are getting infected, but they're not showing up. They're being asymptomatic, as WHO has said. But again, most of this activity is done in the urban areas of many African countries. We don't know what is going on in the rural areas.
All right, then, Professor, let's look at vaccinations. The WHO, other international organizations, and various governments have decried vaccine inequality, especially for Africa. Do you think this will help boost distribution on the continent?
Yeah, obviously, I think the more vaccines we have, the better for everybody. More people can then get vaccinated, and the large number of vulnerable people still uninfected would then be protected. So whatever can be done to ensure that more of these vaccines come into different African countries, it would be a good thing in the right direction. The WHO director for the African region said only about 67 million people so far have been vaccinated. That's a far cry from the large number of the population in the African region, which is over 1 billion, the total African population. So this is the problem. This is what we need to focus on.
But despite the reality on ground, there's been a decline in new cases recorded on the continent. What can this be attributed to?
You remember that we're having this epidemic in waves. The first time we had a wave, then the slowdown, everybody thought was over. Then the second wave came, and the third one followed. And probably these have been stimulated by what we call new variants that are coming in, which also brings the issue of the fact that you and I have to keep preventing the virus from spreading and creating variants. And some of the variants we are showing are actually overcoming some of the vaccination. Therefore, the combination of both vaccination and preventive measure must go hand in hand. Otherwise, we're going to continue to have more waves. Sometimes the next wave will be worse, or it may be less than it. The first wave we had in Nigeria, the second wave in Nigeria was almost 1.5 times the first wave. But the third wave has not been as high as the second wave. But we don't know what the next one is going to be, depending on what variant is coming.
All right, then, Professor Tomori, thank you so much for your thoughts on the program.
It's my pleasure.
When the World Today returns in just a moment, we'll have more on the COVID-19 pandemic, plus tourists flock to viewpoint as Spanish volcano keeps destroying houses. Details in a moment. Stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. The U.S. mission in Nigeria has announced the arrival of over 3.5 million doses of the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine for Nigerians through the COVAX facility. The shipment arrived at the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport in Abuja today. It brings to more than 7.5 million the number of U.S. donated COVID-19 vaccine doses to Nigeria. A statement from the U.S. mission says the U.S. also contributed to the first multilateral donation of AstraZeneca vaccine in March this year. It says overall COVAX has provided Nigeria with over 10 million vaccine doses till date. Here's more on the situation around the world in our COVID-19 Global Update. Russia has reported a record 986 coronavirus-related deaths in the last 24 hours and 31,299 new cases, its highest one-day infection tally since the pandemic began. The Kremlin has blamed the rise in death toll on Russia's slow vaccination campaign and has appealed to people to get the shot. Just around a third of the country's 43 million population has been inoculated. COVID-19 infections in Australia's Victoria has hit a pandemic record as Melbourne, the state capital, looks to end its lockdown earlier than planned next week. The surge in daily cases comes as the state nears a 70% double-dose vaccination rate among adults, a threshold authorities promised would end a months-long lockdown. And over in New Zealand, the country has reported its biggest rise in COVID-19 infections in 6 weeks, with all cases detected in Auckland, raising prospects of a further extension of lockdown restrictions in the country's largest city beyond next week. Some 1.7 million people in Auckland are under strict stay-at-home orders until Monday, October the 18th, as officials look to stamp out the highly infectious Delta outbreak, the first major spate of community cases in the country since early in the pandemic. And finally, Hanoi residents flocked to restaurants across the Vietnamese capital today as the government relaxed restrictions aimed at curbing the spread of COVID-19 for the first time in 3 months, allowing dine-in for restaurants to resume. According to state media, around 98% of Hanoi's adult population has received their first shot of the COVID-19 vaccine, while 50% has received both shots. Meanwhile, reactions of relief have trailed the removal of South Africa from Nigeria's COVID-19 red list. For nearly 4 months, the isolation on arrival policy for travellers from South Africa to Nigeria left many reeling with difficult experiences. Now the restrictions have been taken off. They hope if the policy becomes necessary again, it will be better implemented with less pain for travellers.
To remove further South Africa.
It's the long-awaited news after nearly 4 months of all sorts of hectic experiences on many fronts.
Oh my goodness, very relieved, super excited. We've been through a lot, you know. COVID came, 7 months we were closed. And then at the point where we felt, oh, thank God we're opening up, things are looking great, and then we got hit by this.
So I think there were a lot of ways it could have been handled differently. It was quite a radical step, and certainly when Nigeria and South Africa were removed from the UK's list, we certainly expected that Nigeria would follow very quickly. So we are pleased that that at least has happened.
Weeks back, we brought you Dr. Ayokunle Akombi's experience along with his wife on their trip to Nigeria, which was aborted after the first day.
We haven't gotten far. The last communication we got from the Lagos State Biobank, that was 2 weeks ago. They requested for further documents, which we have sent to them, and we haven't received any further communications from them since then.
Nigeria's High Commissioner to South Africa, Ambassador Mohammed MANTA, has defended the Nigerian government's position and policies, saying it's all based on the advice of scientists in the quest to curb the spread of COVID-19.
Nigerian government does not wish any Nigerian to suffer before coming back home or to suffer before exiting Nigeria. It is imposed on us like it is imposed in other countries.
But for many, it's not all about what was done. It was also about how it was implemented.
I'm also grateful to the government of South Africa for not reciprocating in that same manner. The way and manner in which we handled it, for me, being a Nigerian South African, I think we should have done it better.
We will want the government to be more organic. It's very unfair to isolate travelers whereas other factors that limit the spread of the COVID-19 virus are not being addressed, especially the issue of social distancing.
With the world ramping up vaccination numbers and strengthening measures to ensure health safety protocols adherence, the hope is for the COVID-19 to spring no further severe surprises to the world, so life will get even closer to normal. From Johannesburg, South Africa, Betty Dibia, Channels Television News.
And away from the COVID-19 pandemic, a Taliban delegation has held talks with the Turkish foreign minister and other officials during a visit to Ankara. The Taliban delegation was led by Afghan Foreign Minister Khan Muttaqi. NATO member Turkey maintained its embassy in Afghanistan after Western countries withdrew following the Taliban takeover and has urged those countries to step up engagement. At the same time, it said it will only work fully with the Taliban if they form a more inclusive administration. Turkey has been working with Qatar to help operate Kabul airport and reopen it to international travel. The visit comes a day after the Turkish foreign minister told reporters that he and ministers from other countries plan to visit Kabul for talks with the Taliban. Meanwhile, Pakistan International Airlines has suspended flights to the Afghan capital Kabul after what it called heavy-handed interference by Taliban authorities, including rule changes and intimidation of staff. The suspension came as the Taliban government ordered the airline, the only international company operating regularly out of Kabul, to cut price tickets to levels seen before the fall of the Western-backed Afghan government in August. Earlier, the Taliban warned the PIA and Afghan carrier Cam Air that their Afghan operations risked being blocked unless they agreed to cut ticket prices, which have reached levels increasingly out of reach for most Afghans. With most international airlines no longer flying to Afghanistan, tickets for flights to the Pakistani capital, Islamabad, have been selling for as much as $2,500 on PIA. The Afghan Transport Ministry said in a statement prices on the route should be adjusted to correspond with the conditions of a ticket before the victory of the Islamic Emirate, or the flights would be stopped. And in Spain, despite the heat, dozens of tourists and local inhabitants of La Palma are flocking to a viewpoint near the Cumbre Vieja volcano as the spewing lava continues destroying houses and other infrastructure on the Spanish island. Fire smoldered as rivers of lava could be seen flowing down the mountain, sweeping away trees and sending huge plumes of smoke into the air. According to the Canary Islands Volcanic Emergency Plan, lava from the eruption that began on September 19 has laid waste to a total area of nearly 600 hectares. Torrents of molten rock have destroyed 1,186 buildings since the eruption. About 6,000 people have been evacuated from their homes on La Palma, which has about 83,000 inhabitants. Now, Britain's Queen Elizabeth and her son, Prince Charles, have opened the 6th session of the Welsh Parliament in Cardiff. The Queen, who is in Wales for the first time in 5 years, was welcomed with a 21-gun salute in Cardiff Bay and children waving both Welsh and British flags. The ceremony was supposed to be held in May 2021 after the election, but was delayed due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
The Wales Act 2017 established this Parliament on a new basis, and you've used this legislation to help the public better understand your work and to include more people in the democratic process. As a result, this Parliament is now recognised in law as Senedd Cymru, or the Welsh Parliament.
And speaking of the Queen, a new wax figure has been unveiled at the Madame Tussauds Museum at Blackpool in England's northwest. The waxwork of the Queen was carried through the streets of Blackpool in a horse-drawn carriage before arriving outside the museum. Inside, the new exhibit was displayed beside wax figures of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. And that's the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Teniola Shuboale.